Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Bugwadia, and I graduated the CHPR program in August of 2021, and I'm currently a medical student here at Stanford. I am so excited to share with you a little bit about my journey with Dr. Tia Rich through the CHPR experience, particularly both from taking her class as well as having the opportunity to TA with her last school year. I would say that going into the CHPR program, I had a very strong interest in helping manage the psychosocial aspects of chronic medical conditions, as well as kind of increasing the awareness and understanding between physicians as well as patients. Now, what I wasn't really sure of, I'd heard this idea, contemplative practices, and I had no idea, to be honest, what it was really about. I had this idea in my head, like, okay, something about yoga or meditation. But I was really curious about, okay, well, what are the evidence-based practices behind this, and how can we really leverage it and use it towards holistic medicine? Whether you're an aspiring clinician or an aspiring community health worker or an educator or anyone in between, I think it's really important that we consider for ourselves what this idea of wellness actually means. And to me, I think it's important that we come up with our own personal contemplative practice plans that we can use, again, in our personal lives, in our professional lives, in our academic lives. So as an example of kind of what I was able to learn and get out of the particular course I took was called CHPR 234, Applying Contemplative Practices. And what we really learned in that class was not only what are these contemplative practices in a conceptual way, but we also got to actually experience them, which I think was a really incredible feeling. Not only doing all of these readings and having that cerebral knowledge, but having that lived experience, I think was really useful. Just like with any learning, right? You take some or you take it all in, right? And then you start to realize, wow, this is something I can 100% use in my life. Or, hey, I tried this and it wasn't for me, but it's still good and important to know so that it can potentially, refer it out to other people who might find it useful. So I'm happy to share with you all kind of a little bit more about my journey, particularly when it came to integrating what I was learning with contemplative practices to my own clinical and professional interests. As someone who was diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease when I was 10, I have a very strong interest, particularly in the inflammatory bowel disease or IBD space. We know that living with any type of lifelong illness comes with a plethora of different psychosocial impacts. Oftentimes, that includes an increased risk for anxiety and depression. I also knew kind of coming into the CHPR program, there is more research being done specifically about this idea of the brain-gut connection. And this has implications for clinician recommendations about the treatment and management for IBD. But as I started really looking into the research, I saw that there wasn't too much specifically about how do we harness the power of contemplative practice, which has a large evidence base, but how do we actually apply that in the context of IBD? So that's what I actually designed my entire final project about. What I really was taken by during our contemplative practice class was this idea of breathing. And the fact that we can use so many different types of breathing in so many different ways. And so I think that what I wanted to do was draw from both my lived experience, both as a patient and in the classroom, as well as the existing body of scientific research. And I came up with a contemplative practice intervention that aimed to introduce breathing as a skill and tangible resource to IBD patients. Really with the end objective of reducing the psychosocial stress experienced by these patients. The specific breathing practices that I chose to focus on and implement in this intervention were derived from the yoga contemplative tradition, including coherent breathing, resistance breathing, and alternate nostril breathing. And those were all very specific practices that I was exposed to in class, and then when I was able to go deeper into the research myself as well. So what I ended up designing was a workshop that I was hoping to present at an IBD nonprofit. We oftentimes at this nonprofit host many educational events for both patients and clinicians. And so the goal really was to help introduce all of those 3 different types of breathing to patients and give them these tangible tools by teaching them the practices, but also teaching them the evidence base behind them. And then allowing them time, not just saying, hey, here you go, I'm going to teach you this new skill, but let's actually build in some time for reflection and implementation. So really what I was able to come up with was, this specific intentional workshop that taught, an introduction first, like what is this mind gut of research that exists? What is the research around breathing? What is the research around IBD? And then really putting it all together by doing a guided breathing exercise, again, with coherent breathing, resistance breathing, alternate nostril breathing. I then kind of used what I learned again in this course to think about this idea of, okay, now that they will have these skills, what are the ways, again, that we can actually break down our experiences and understand what works for us and what doesn't work for us so that we can then make it an actual sustainable practice. And that's also a skill that I would say I 100%, learned and grew in this course. I would say for myself as a medical student now, we talk a lot, of course, about anatomy and physiology and how to be present with your patient at the clinic. But I think it's also equally important for us to think about, our own wellness. And when we talk to our patients about this, hey, let's increase your lifestyle, or hey, let's decrease your stress. I don't want to be the type of doctor who's just saying, okay, let me tell you and recommend you this thing or this practice without me having actually done it myself and really understanding the good that it can do in my life. We are all very busy people, very tired people, stressed out people. And if you aren't now, maybe you will be in the future, right? So it's good for us to be able to harness the science and harness kind of previous practices and really put it into play in our own lives. And I think that is true, particularly of the contemplative practice classes that you'll have in Chipper. And it's also very true of the rest of the classes you might have throughout your Chipper journey. So if you do have any questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. My email address is Bugwadia, my last name, Bugwadia @stanford.edu. I wish you all the best of luck through your journey, both with contemplative practices as well as Chipper as a whole. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.